Then we had to go out and find the coach, and I thought maybe he would really be partial to, the Green Bay Packers, but we really totally thorough, and he was totally objective. And after interviewing, talking to people, they were all really great candidates. I think the enthusiasm, the knowledge, the background, Jeff stood out amongst them all. So we were really fortunate that he was available. We made our decision early. As you know, there are many openings this year, probably more than ever before. And I'm very happy to be standing today knowing we got who we wanted and that the rest of the teams are still looking.
We're aligned in terms.
Jeff Hafley is not a safe hire, but he is a purposeful one. Miami is betting that discipline, defense, and alignment will succeed where offensive brilliance without accountability had previously failed. Whether that leads to sustainable roster building, winning seasons, playoff victories, or Super Bowl will depend entirely on Jeff Hafley's ability to grow beyond his coordinator strengths and avoid repeating the limitations he showed as Boston College's head coach. And that is your thesis for today's episode 6 of the Phish Outta Water Show. Let's get to it. All right. So let's start with the reaction, right? Because how this went down is just as important as much as who the Dolphins hired. So the Miami Dolphins have officially hired Jeff Hafley as their next coach, and almost immediately the process itself became the story. And here's what we know so far, or what we've heard. The hiring reportedly leaked just 3 minutes after the Dolphins announced that they had concluded Hafley's interview. This, according to Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, 3 minutes, not hours, not days, and that alone should raise eyebrows. So according to sources around the league, including one of the agents representing one of the other candidates, this job was very likely Hafley's from the start. And when you look at the facts, that absolutely tracks. Hafley was the only candidate brought back for a second interview. He has a prior working relationship with the new GM, John Eric Sullivan, and by all accounts, that familiarity, comfort level, and mutual respect clearly played a major role. So he impressed in the initial interview. There's no argument there. But the larger concern is, did anybody else get a true chance to compete for the position? So this is where the educated fans, myself included, start to have a problem. So if the Dolphins were serious about a truly comprehensive vetting process, why then didn't you call Sean McDermott? Why didn't you call Mike McCarthy? One is a recently fired division rival head coach with playoff experience that has been kicking your butt for the last 9 years, and the other is a Super Bowl winning head coach who also previously worked with John Eric Sullivan. So, and then there's the elephant in the room, the 2 minority candidates that were interviewed. By all indications, those interviews appeared to have been procedural and not substantive. The optics box are checked, and they were not legitimate contenders for the position. They weren't in true consideration. So that's just not a Dolphins issue, that's an NFL issue. This exact scenario is what critics are going to refer to as a good old boy hire.
Just a good old boy, never meaning no harm.
Basically, you just stuck with familiarity, and it outweighed the openness or the transparency of the process. It became a performance instead of a competition between the candidates. And that lends credibility to Brian Flores' lawsuit against the NFL and the Miami Dolphins. A major component of that case alleges that the hiring practices across the league are structured in ways that lead to predetermined outcomes. And what we just witnessed was a pattern of that perfectly, blatantly. So to be clear on that, this is not a declaration that Hafley can't succeed. It's just, this is going to be a critique of the process that once again suggests the Dolphins have prioritized comfort level over exploration. And if this franchise really want to break the cycle and not just be changing the names every 3 to 4 years, how you choose your leader matters just as much as who that leader is. So in regards to interviewing your two candidates to fit the good old Rooney Rule, you called in Kelvin Shepherd and Patrick Graham. But you had Anthony Weaver sitting right there in-house who was absolutely qualified enough to at least get the interview. So if you were going to sit there and waste your time, why not interview somebody who was in-house already? Somebody who could at least in the interview process might have given you better perspective on what happened and why we failed this past season. He was there up close. So yeah, I know, but that's where we'll pick it back up, man. So we're going to ask, what exactly are the Dolphins betting on with Jeff Hafley? Well, first we're going to see if this coach. We're going to see where he fits and where he doesn't fit in the good old matrix here that I created. So let's take a look at the matrix here. Okay, so now the reaction's out the way. Let's get to the real question. What exactly are the Dolphins betting on with Jeff Hafley, and where does he land in the matrix? So we're going to start with what Miami clearly likes about Hafley, because the hire is not random, and he was not the most nor the best qualified candidate. So first off, his defensive modernization on the matrix, Hafley lands at a 3 in scheme flexibility, and then a 3 with doing more with the less category. And that tells you the complete story about the hire. His strongest NFL calling card is not elite results. It's a conceptual defense. So his background emphasizes split safety structures, too high, the set that prevented who from being, never mind. So match coverage principles, disguise looks, quarterback deception. He's going to basically be winning with structure instead of constant pressure like Flores. Philosophically, I would say his system is very similar to Vic Fangio's system. It's basically a modern bend but don't break defense, and it's basically built to survive against a Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. You're not going to overpower them with this defense. You're waiting for them to make a mistake is what it is. So while Miami is what they're betting on here is that the ideas translate faster than the resume build. So you're saying that we don't need a defensive savant with rings. We need a system that basically stops bleeding points and keeps us competitive in the game. And that's a reasonable bet, but it's still a bet. So the biggest risk is that there's no sustained NFL stretch where Hafley's defense is ranked in the top tier across any number of seasons or any consecutive seasons. There's no dominant run. There's no videotape that says this unit scares you. It's all projection. It's not proof. So basically where Hafley genuinely does score well is the locker room credibility. He earns a 4 with the locker room. And that's not by accident. Players have consistently said he's explicit, he's relatable, he's prepared. He basically connects without trying to dominate like a Nick Saban kind of coach. And that matters for a team that's coming off major instability, mixed messaging. This is going to be leadership through connection, not fear. Not that we're going to cut you next week if you fumble the ball. This isn't ego, and it's definitely not going to be a player-led team. But this matters. It's he's never led a locker room with some sort of expectation to it. So that's basically where the hire gets flimsy for me. The biggest red flag in the matrix is right there. You can't ignore it. The head coaching experience is a 2. It's orange. So yes, he has been a head coach, but the context of that matters. So we're going to take a look at what he did at Boston College. And he had his results show that there was program stabilization. There was some defensive identity that he established within the program, and he culturally he's a professional. So what you don't see here is breakthrough success, though, right? No leap seasons. You don't see where the team has gone from 7-5 to a 10-2 season. There's no elevation beyond the basic expectations that you would have for a team like Boston College. Oops. So. Like I said, there's no leap season, there's no elevation, there's no proof that he can raise ceilings. Boston College story tells us basically that Hafley can run a program, but it doesn't tell us that he can elevate one. And again, what are the Dolphins betting on? They're betting that he has learned what not to do as a college head coach, and hoping that that lesson translates upward to the NFL level. And that's growth-based production, not evidence-based confidence. So, yeah. The next major concern on the matrix there. All right. So, again, they're betting that Hafley learned what not to do as a college head coach, and that the lesson translate to the NFL level. The next concern is quarterback adaptability. That's another orange with a score of a 2. So this one is plain and simple. There's no quarterback development on his resume. There's no track record of elevating quarterback play, and there's no offensive success tethered to what his statistical career is. And so what it's going to do is put pressure on whoever the offensive coordinator is. Because if you miss on the offensive coordinator hire, there's no fallback as far as offensively. Hafley can't be Dan Campbell and say, I'll fix this myself and just become the play caller, at least not on offense anyway. It's not a fatal flaw, but it's a limitation that he has. So, as far as his qualifications, is the cons of the defense, there's no cultural dominance, there's no schematic revolution from his schemes, and he has no staff building legacy. There's no such thing as the Hafley tree just yet. And that could have already started with his time at Boston College. So there's no track record of turning good players into great players. So again, as a head coach, there are limitations, and that's why the matrix is going to keep him capped. As far as why the score lands where it does, this is where he puts his highest single score in the whole matrix. He's a 5. He's an owner perfect fit as far as numerically. So it's important to be precise right there. It's not green, and that distinction matters. So structurally, the score is correct. Hafley checks every single last Stephen Ross box. He's professional. He's controlled, media safe, adaptable. He's not going to posture up on you like Brian Flores did. He's not going to demand power like Adam Gase did. He's not going to challenge any of the ownership dynamics. So he's exactly the type of profile that Stephen Ross has historically favored. But the color, it reflects the evidence that it's circumstantial and pattern-based, not results-oriented. So the score isn't earned through him being an NFL head coach. It's inferred from the alignment.
We're aligned in terms of player development. But that only works if you're aligned within the player.
I learned about alignment.
That's going to happen from the temperament of him, his demeanor, lack of friction, rather than proven success under any type of stress as the HCIC. In other words, Miami isn't betting on what Hafley has already handled at this level. They're betting on what he's unlikely to disrupt. Okay, so that's why the score lands at a yellow 5. It's a high confidence projection. It's not fully proven. It's not a fully proven outcome. So he fits Stephen Ross perfectly by profile and predictability. He hasn't yet lived through the ownership stress cycles that would turn that green. So the matrix is saying something very specific here. Hafley doesn't win this category by dominance or resume. He wins it by organizational comfort, and that tells you a whole lot about what the Dolphins were prioritizing with this particular hire. So then once you understand why Jeff Hafley lands where he does in the matrix, the next question you can ask yourself is, what does the hire actually tell you about your owner and the new GM and this collective body that makes up the front office? So coaching hires, it don't just tell you what a team thinks about football. It tells you what an organization is afraid of, what they don't want to do. And this hire shows you exactly what I'm talking about. It basically confirms that Stephen Ross is the boss. He's going to maintain control. He wants stability over upside. He don't want the coach that can outshine him. So even though he wants the first time up and comer head coach, so it's a catch-22 within his own head as far as his hiring practices. But So he's not a disruptor. He's not a power broker. He's not someone who arrives with any kind of leverage. He can't make any demands, and he does not have a strong public identity. He's not going to be the type of coach, if the front office messes something up and the coach was right, the public can say, you should have listened to that coach. You know, that's not who Hafley is. So he's a coach who fits into the organization and not one who reshapes it. And that aligns perfectly with the Matrix. So no green dominance categories, no red disqualifiers, just a lot of safe yellow, workable, manageable, malleable. He's basically their puppet. He's the front office puppet. He's the avatar of the front office. So, and that tells you Ross is not trying to find the next great coach, which is why they didn't go with Chris Shula. I am guessing they basically want to avoid the next organizational catastrophe. So this is basically a safe bet. So it also tells you that the GM, John Eric Sullivan, is operating under tight ownership parameters. If this was a fully empowered GM like an Ozzie Newsome, the Matrix would look a whole lot different. You'd see a lot more volatility. You'd see more upside bets. You would see at least one category where one of the coaches overwhelms all of the other candidates in the model. And Hafley doesn't overwhelm anything. So instead, it feels like a hire almost made out of panic, like they rushed it. But it at the same time, it has a very specific mandate. Stabilize the building, stabilize the ticket sales, don't create noise, and don't create risk. So it doesn't mean that your GM is incompetent. It just means that he got to operate inside these boundaries that they've set up for him. They don't want him to go off the rails. And, you know, I mean, that's what that is. So this is just something that points back to ownership. This is how Ross is structuring this chain of command here. So the Dolphins are still optimizing process, not performance. Everything about Hafley says he's a system coach. He's about structure. He's about communication. He's about alignment.
We're aligned in terms of player development. But that only works if you're aligned within the player.
I learned about alignment.
So, you know, just like, you know, who was a system quarterback, this guy is a system coach. No culture shock here. And that's why the Matrix is going to keep landing in the same place over and over again. He's a process bet. The organization believes that if they reduce the chaos, they minimize the friction, kill the unpredictability, that it'll change. It'll start to go the other way. So the risk with that is that the NFL is not going to reward you for being a stable organization. They reward you for becoming better on the field. And here's a quotable for you. Stability without a ceiling raiser eventually turns into stagnation. So this hire would confirm that Miami is still uncomfortable with a larger personality type coach. To take a look at the coaches that they didn't hire, and you could take a look at the coaches that they didn't interview. You know, so no strong personality program builders, no coaches that have that public leverage, no figures who could overshadow ownership. He fits because he doesn't challenge the hierarchy, and that's all that is. That's not accidental. That's intentional. So it just confirms that the Dolphins believe that the roster, not the coach, is the solution. It's the old Jerry Jones versus Jimmy Johnson problem. You know, when Jerry Jones said that he could get anybody to coach that team. How's that going for you, Jerry? Yeah. And how's that going for us? So, it basically says that they're saying that the talent on the roster is already good enough. The real problem was misalignment, not the ability of the players. And that's why they didn't go after a coach who moved the needle. They went after a coach who is a stabilizer. So if you step back, You look at the Hafley hire, it answers a very specific organizational question, and it's not who gives us the best chance to dominate the AFC, but the real question is who gives us the best chance to not have this thing blow up in our face, and we have to blow this up for real.
And if we don't allow ego and pride to get in the way, we'll be fine. We've seen other organizations that do that, and then you're running uphill. It becomes fractured. There's silos, and now you got a big problem.
Because they have certain players that they want to keep, and it may not be total scorched earth. They have something to work with there. So, yeah. But it tells you exactly where Stephen Ross and his front office still are in their decision-making process, and that leads you to the next question: what happens next? They've got to build a staff, they got to put the roster together, and it's got to fit into a certain timeline. So now that you understand what the hire says about Ross and the GM, the urgency shifts immediately to what happens next and how fast does it have to happen. About as fast as this segment has to move. Jeff Hafley's success or failure will not be looked at by itself without considering real-world situations, other factors that would normally affect it. Long story short, it's not going to be decided in a vacuum. It's going to be decided by the staff that he hires, how he and Jay Easy handle the roster, and how quickly the organization aligns behind him.
We're aligned in terms of player development. But that only works if you're aligned within the player.
I learned about alignment.
Zero margin for error, zero margin for delay. You know, starting with the staff, because this is going to be the most important piece right here. Hafley is not walking around with proven NFL head coach blueprint. Okay, his coordinators are going to be determinative, not complimentary. On defense, he needs somebody who can translate his concepts into NFL results immediately. And not a teacher, not a developmental assistant, somebody who can teach his philosophy to the team, because he's the head coach now. He's got other stuff to do. He needs a play caller who's already lived through a few AFC quarterbacks, some third down pressures, and a late season fatigue run. So I want you to remember this when the season starts, okay?
Yeah, I'm going to call plays. That's really important to me, and I have a plan in place, kind of like I watched Kyle Shanahan do it, and kind of like how I watched Matt do it in Green Bay. But I am going to call plays. It's really important to me. It's something that I love to do. It really connects me with that group. I think it will bring a lot of energy to that side of the football, and I think the details will be exactly how I want them early on as we go.
So on offense, the bar is going to be even higher, because the Matrix already told us this. Hafley is not bringing any sort of quarterback development with him. This puts enormous pressure on the offensive coordinator to make sure that you elevate the quarterback play right off the rip, you stabilize the offense early, and you remove all doubt about where the leadership actually lives on that side of the ball. So if you whiff on the offensive coordinator hire, that entire regime becomes fragile within the first month of the season. You know, it's not going to take 2 years to see it fall apart. You're going to see how bad it looks off rip. So the other roster implications, the hire tells us that the Dolphins believe the roster is better than the record suggested. There were a 7-win team this past season, so that means the issue was not talent. It was more about cohesion and execution. And again, that key word, alignment. So I just don't see them absolutely nuking the roster, but they're going to move the money around. You know, like Omar Kelly said, there's always a way to move the money. You can always move the money. So, yeah. Veterans should be safer under this hire rather than a culture reset coach, because a Harbaugh would come in here and boop, all y'all gone. Hafley's temperament favors the buy-in, not purges, okay? So here's the risk for that. Continuity without accountability turns into complacency. Hafley is going to have to prove early that his leadership style doesn't drift into a comfort management like some other coaches who have previously been in charge of the direction of the Miami Dolphins. So this is going to bring us right to the timeline. This ain't a multi-year grace period thing. He's got two years to get this thing in line. It's got to look like something right off the bat. The profile suggests patience. The circumstances won't allow for it. Your patience as a fan won't allow for it. The roster is expensive. The AFC is tough as all hell get out. And Bristol Ross has already lived through 3 resets now. So he's going to be judged immediately on his staff competence. First game of the season, that's what we're going to be looking at. Defensive coherence, that's the first month of the season. And then locker room control by the first time we hit our first losing streak. So it's not going to be a quiet build. You're going to see everything happen under a magnifying glass. The most important part is that the higher forces alignment. Hafley is not powerful enough to survive any sort of dysfunction that goes on above him. He's not Harbaugh. If the front office leaks or ownership meddles or the future owner, the son-in-law, the one who's married to his daughter, if he's a finance guy, whatever, he's gonna pass the team down to his daughter. He could start meddling. The message gets fractured, and he's gonna be exposed real quickly. And that means that this hire is just as much of a test to the organization, how they have structured themselves, as it is to find out who Jeff Hafley is. So if Miami is real serious about stability, this is where they're going to have to prove it. It got to come with speed, clarity, and unified execution, and that's what they spoke about in the press conference. So Jeff Hafley doesn't buy you time. He demands precision in everything that happens from here on out. And if this organization can't deliver that immediately, the Matrix outcome won't matter at all. And that's going to bring us to our final question here. What's the real verdict on the hire? We've walked through the Matrix. We went through the staff implications, organizational context. So be clear about what this hire actually is. It's not a gamble on brilliance or offensive genius, and it's definitely not a bet on personality domination. This is a containment hire. The Dolphins did not hire Jeff Hafley because he won the Matrix. They hired him because he didn't lose it. He doesn't break anything. He doesn't challenge the power structure. There's no uncertainty with him for the most part. In Matrix terms, he's still a 31 out of 50. And that number tells you the entire story. So no red disqualifiers, no green separators, just a clean control profile. It says that this is not going to blow up in our faces. But here's the truth of the matter. And this matters because that's what we do here on the Phish Outta Water Show. We only deal with the facts of the matter. Process coaches only work if the process above them works. And Hafley cannot save a fractured front office. He can't override any sort of ownership tension. Not to say that that's going to happen. I'm just, the facts of the matter. He cannot compensate if they make poor coordinator hires. If the organization stays clean and unified and disciplined, and if everything around him is perfect, like it needed to be for a certain quarterback who will remain nameless, if it's perfect, it should work. If not, it's gonna show up real fast. And that's why the hire is revealing. Miami didn't ask who gives us the chance to be great. Miami said, who gives us the best chance to survive ourselves? Because we know we just might mess it up. So none of this makes Hafley a bad coach. We don't know if he's a bad coach. He could be the white Mike Tomlin. He's basically a mirror of what Stephen Ross's priorities are. He's a mirror of where the organization actually is. he shows you where they are, not where they want to be. You ever heard the term dress for the job you want? Okay, so hire the coach that you need to have success. All right, so Jeff Hafley can work here. He fits here. He makes sense here. But if the Dolphins fail again, it's not going to be because they took the wrong swing. It's like, what did Mr. Ross tell Sully? He said, if it doesn't work here, it won't be for a lack of resources. So same thing with the hire here. If the Dolphins fail, it won't be because they took the wrong swing. It'll be because they were afraid to take one at all. They basically went down on strikes. You went down looking. So to that, I say to you, the Miami Dolphins organization,
You're a chicken!
you know, Dave Hyde of the Miami Herald posed a question on the Joe Rose Show and asked, did the Dolphins hire the best coach for the job? Or the best coach available, something like that. He said it was either too soon to tell or that remains to be seen or some generic answer like that. I don't know. I was too busy. Yeah, okay. So basically he said it was too tough to answer that right now. But the answer is no. They didn't hire the best coach available, nor did they hire the best coach for the job. They hired who was the safest coach for the job. He clearly wasn't the best coach available. You had McDermott out there. You had McCarthy out there. You had Chris Shula out there. Again, not that I wanted Chris Shula, but on the Matrix, he outscored him. So at the very minimum, he should have gotten a second interview too. But you were afraid that he was going to hop on a plane, go to the Titans, go to the Raiders, get hired by one of them. Maybe one of them would offer him a sweeter deal. Maybe one of them would say, hey, we'll give you roster control. He wouldn't have roster control here in Miami, so you run the risk of them hiring him before you have a chance to bring him in. And that's why they rushed it. It was a rushed, panicked hire. So, yeah. You had two better coaches out there, and you barely even sniffed at them. So, that's it, man. You know, I hope it works out for us. You know, it's always fins up, baby. Foes down, and we just take a look at the facts of the matter, and I hope for all of the success to Jeff Hafley, man. You know, welcome to the Fins, baby. Fins up. I really want you to succeed. I hope this works out, and that's all I got for you, man. Phish Outta Water Show, baby. You know who we are. You know, click like and subscribe. We gonna be here. We'll see you on the next one.
I always had the conviction on Haf. That doesn't mean that I thought there were really good conversations that took place. To be perfectly honest with you, in the last interview with him, I sat back and kind of let them lead it because I thought it was important for them to ask and get answers to what they needed to. It became very clear to me after Haf's Zoom interview that they saw a lot of what I saw, and that when they came in person, it kind of dotted the I's and crossed the T's and slam dunked it, if you will. I don't know if I'm answering your question per se, but I could watch them grow in the conviction that I had coming through the door. But I want to be very clear, it was never done from the start. I know there's a perception out there. I can appreciate that. I understand that. But that is a misnomer by a long shot. There was a process that had to take place. We all jumped into it with both feet, eyes open, and we made the best decision at the end of it that we felt like was going to take the Miami Dolphins to where they needed to be. In terms of the power structure with the hiring of Jeff Hafley, I came into this and was very, very vocal from the jump that, look, I have a lot of conviction on a guy that I'm in Green Bay with, but we have to go into this eyes open. I said it before in the previous statement. My job is to do what is best for the Miami Dolphins, period.